We're going to begin, folks, because Chief Delatorre has a fixed time limit that he must adhere to. So can we get approval of today's agenda? So moved. Great. Second? Great. How about the minutes? Any corrections or changes to the minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
Any objections? Great. So as you saw from the agenda, we are going to begin with our speaker. Chief Delatorre was assigned to the NYPD in November of '79, began his career in the 42nd Precinct, promoted to sergeant in October of '84, lieutenant in November of '89, captain in January of '92, deputy inspector of May 1994, inspector in August '95, deputy chief in March 2000, assistant chief 2006, and most recently bureau chief 2018. God, if you keep going at that rate, you're going to be God soon. Yeah. Wow. He's Office of the Chief of Department, Community Affairs Bureau, Patrol Borough Queens North, Patrol Borough Bronx, Manhattan North, Staten Island, and the Police Academy. Currently, he's Chief of Transit Police, and we're fortunate to have him. I have seen the Chief both out in the field and at his reports, during his reports at the board, and we are very fortunate he gets it. So without further ado, because he does have a fixed time limit, let's welcome Chief Delatorre of the New York Transit Bureau Police. Thank you so much, Chief.
Thank you. First off, I want to thank all of you for having me here and allowing me to enjoy your view. You've got quite the view here.
Close when you're here.
Yeah. In my office, I have scaffolding, and occasionally there's a raccoon that goes by and waves at us, climbing across the scaffolding in the window. But it's a great space over there as well, though. So I'm going to go over a few topics, and then if you have any other areas of concern that I can help you with, I'll certainly jump into them too. I'm going to start with the neighborhood policing rollout in transit. As you know, the top side in the precincts, they've had neighborhood policing now for a couple of years, and I think the rollout is just about complete, if not complete. Our rollout started, sometime behind the top side commands. When I say top side, I mean the precincts. That's transit talk. I'm learning it. So our rollout started later. I was assigned here at the end of January, and our first two districts went out in April. Then we had, let me just make sure I'm giving you the exact dates or the exact times. Then we had 4 more districts that we rolled out. Was it in July, Vinny? In July. So currently we have 6 districts that have rolled out, and we're rolling out 3 more. So out of the 12 districts, 3 more are rolling out as we speak. It'll be between now and the end of January that we'll have the other 3 rolled out. We'll have 3 districts left at that point. Those 3 will be rolled out, we expect, by April. So by April of 2019, all 12 transit districts will have the neighborhood policing model in place. So now the question is, what is the neighborhood policing model? How does it look in transit? How does it fit in transit as compared to your local precinct where you may live or work? So the neighborhood policing model in transit is a little bit different from top side. It's the same philosophy, the same core beliefs, but obviously our community is a little bit different. A lot of people challenged us up front and said, what do you mean transit? We have no community. And our argument was, of course we do. We have the same people getting on the same station every day, getting off the same station every day, riding the same line every day. That's a community. Albeit it may be temporary throughout the day, on and off, but that's a community. And those people are the people that we want to engage with. The other people that are our community that even a stronger relationship is growing with obviously are the transit or MTA partners we have in the transit system. They're working the same stations. I am a transit baby, if you will. My mom was a token clerk, and my father worked at the 207th Street station. They both retired on transit pensions and lived out their lives. So I have a lot of familiarity with transit. I spent a lot of time in my mother's token booth, picking her up, visiting her at lunchtime. And she was
playing with the tokens.
Yeah, playing with the tokens. And I always tell the story to my cops about how I would see the transit cops step into the token booth, and I was a little boy, and I would look up at this tall cop and realize that he was the person that was going to get my mother home that day, because being a token clerk back then and going out to pull the turnstiles was an incredibly dangerous job, and my mom was victimized numerous times throughout her career when she was pulling those tokens. People would wait till the token booth clerk opened up the booth, and they would just attack them as they try to grab the token, the can of tokens from them. So, or get into the booth and get the money if they could. So I lived in that environment as a child, so I really feel connected to transit. And, you know, I'm probably not far from the end of my career, Andrew, I don't know, but yeah, so, but I am happy that that this is where I wound up. I've never worked in transit before, and I know my mom and dad looking down would be very, very proud to see me here as the chief of transit. So getting back to the neighborhood policing, we had to change the way we connect a little bit. So on top side, they're having the build-a-block meetings where they go into different communities and everybody comes out and meets the neighborhood coordination officer. For us, you know, trying to stop a commuter to have a meeting somewhere could be somewhat challenging. So what we've attempted to do, and it's going fairly well so far, is we're connecting with them via the internet. We have emails out there. Every NCO, the NCO is a neighborhood coordination officer. So we've taken, just to give you the bigger view, we've taken a district like District 12. We've broken it down into 3 sectors. So we've taken a district and made it into, so I mean, arguably you could say almost like 3 little districts within it. So these 3 sectors now, each one has a team of NCOs, neighborhood coordination officers, that are responsible for everything that goes on in that sector, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are the go-to person. You know, we were lucky to have President Byford come on at about the same time. I think he's a terrific guy, a very forward thinker, and his vision for transit wasn't that different from ours. So he has now appointed his group station managers. And in the same way we're giving our NCOs specific areas of responsibility, like these 10 or 15 stations and the line going through it belongs to you, and everything that happens there belongs to you. He's got group station managers now, and everything that happens in their stations belongs to them. So not like when my parents worked for transit, if something happened in a station, you know, that whoever had that station would have to call, and it would go to a different division, and you'd have to wait online to get a response. You know, on Andy's side, to his credit, the group station manager has the power basically to reach out to all those resources that are needed. Well, in the same way, our neighborhood coordination officers have the authority and are expected to reach out to any and all resources that are needed to correct whatever conditions exist in those stations. So now we have more direct accountability. To make that happen, what we did is we have 3 shifts, as you know, from the NYPD, the 8 to 4, 4 to 12, midnight shift. So on each of those shifts, we have steady sector officers. So those steady sector officers are the team that supports the neighborhood coordination team that has that steady sector. So on all 3 shifts, we have the same police officers patrolling the same group of stations within that district every day, every evening, and every night. So that NCO now can share the problems that come up with those shifts, the same officers on his or her team for whatever time it's happening. And the other thing we did, which was really, I thought, a really good move, is in the stations and the districts now that have NCOs, you'll see their pictures on the walls, and you'll see the team in place, and the team is very clear. It's the 2 NCOs responsible for that station, and there's a group station manager right in between them in that picture. And there's an email address to reach the NCOs and the group station manager. So how does it work? I have a complaint. I send it over the MTA portal. It gets routed to the NYPD. The NYPD routes it to the district, to the NCO sergeant, and to the NCO directly. If we get an email that comes in, or even a tweet that comes into us on something, once again, the district, the NCO sergeant, and the NCO to make sure someone's responding. I'm not talking about a 9/11 situation where you need an emergency response. I'm talking about a condition, you know, a recurring condition especially, that they can respond to. So then the expectation is pretty simple, and this is what we've been seeing. The NCO has a responsibility of getting back to the person who sent that email or that message, set up a meeting with them if possible, or communicate with them over via the internet. But ideally, if you're getting on this subway station at 7 o'clock every morning, I'm going to be there tomorrow morning to meet you and to address the conditions you're talking about. And we've seen it going very well. We're getting great feedback from the public, a lot of very positive responses from those who had conditions, and they saw, first of all, they get a better understanding of what our capability is, and they team up with us to help us address the condition. And in that regard, when I talk about teaming up with us, the NCO will often give their cell phone number to the person that's communicating what the issue is in that station, so that as they see something in that station, they can still communicate with the NCO direct, and we can try to make sure that we're addressing it. I don't believe this is going to cure all the problems that exist in transit right now, but I think it's a really good first step. We have accountability. We have people taking pride in what their real estate is. They are NCOs and our group station managers. And I know there's a lot of feedback we're getting from them. And again, I consider it a very positive step in the right direction. We're having group station managers meetings with our NCOs. We cross-trained them. When the group station managers were being trained, I showed up to explain the neighborhood policing program to them and what our role was. And when we trained our NCOs, President Byford came in, several other people from Transit came in, Transit Homeless came in, and our neighborhood coordination officers got trained by them as well, so that we're all speaking the same language and have a mutual understanding of what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think it's going well. I'm going to give you an example. Oops, sorry, I didn't get to silence my phone. I'm going to give you an example of something we did recently, and it's going to lead us into the world of fare evasion. Is it fair to talk about that?
Absolutely.
We have fare evasion in transit? Yeah, you bet we do. We have it, and I want to clarify some misnomers about it. So part of our fare evasion, well, let me roll back. I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, I got an email on a condition at a station, one of our stations, where they said that fare evasion was rampant. Now, I believe the biggest losses in fare evasion are where we see the herding. The herding. So it's not the one person who's waiting to sneak over the turnstile. It's the crowded stations where somebody opens a gate, somebody goes in, somebody else goes in, and there's no cop there at the moment, and someone else sees it and says, you know, why am I going to pay now? You know, and a lot of these people, the overwhelming majority of them, could afford to pay. And for those who can't afford to pay, we know we have the fair pay plan coming in place now too. Fair fares, right? So we have that in place, coming in place now too. So there really is, in my opinion, no excuse for anyone not to pay. And the other thing that went on when I was a child, went on throughout my entire time as a police officer, and I witnessed it again at a station recently, is when somebody truly can't pay and they're stuck, they go up to the token clerk, or to the station agent, as you call them now, and I watched someone say to them, you know, we just came in from out of town, we're homeless, we're heading to a shelter, we have no money to get there. The agent said, well, let me see your ID. She looked at their ID and said, go ahead through the gate. You know, so with permission, they can go through the gate. And in extreme circumstances, throughout my career, police officers have walked people up to the station and asked the token agent, you know, or the station agent, you mind if I put this person in? We've always got a yes. So what happens now is I get an email about a condition in a station in Queens. So I wanted to get a sense of what was really going on at this station. The person who sent it in certainly appeared credible and said they had counted numerous people going through the gate during a certain time period. So we put together a team to go out there and support the neighborhood coordination officer who was responsible for that station, because that's not a job that officer or those two officers can necessarily do on their own, not the way I wanted it done. So we put a team of officers together, we sent them out there, and in a 2-hour period, we interrupted, I wouldn't call it apprehended, but we interrupted and pulled aside 99 people who didn't pay. Now, we have 99 people, we have a captured audience, and now we're going to find out why they're not paying, right? 54 of them were students who had Metro cards, who simply didn't want to wait to go through the turnstile. So they were turned around, they were instructed, turned around and sent through the turnstile. Another 20 were senior citizens who would get a half-pay Metro card anyway, as I understand. So they were instructed and warned that next time they were going to get a summons, and they were turned around and sent through the turnstile. The other 25 were the herders, and one person was somebody we had to arrest. But the other 25 were the herders. Herders. When I say herders, I mean people that saw everybody else going through and decided they were going to save enough money for a slice of pizza today. So, and they all got summonses. They all got summonses. Now we go back to the same station the next day to measure our impact. The next day, same 2-hour period, 4 seniors. They were not the same as the day before. It was 4 seniors. It was 20 students. So we went from 54 students down to 20. So word had gotten out, the police want you to use your Metro card. And 15 people who were the herders, or the people who just simply didn't want to pay. So we saw a dramatic change from one day to the next. Then the NCOs went out on their own on the 3rd day to watch again, and had a lesser group of people as well. So it's a matter of going to the right stations when it comes to fare evasion, going to the right stations where we have a large volume of people herding through the gates, and I think we can have an impact. So currently, the group station managers have identified some of those stations and communicated with our neighborhood coordination officers where those stations are, and the NCOs now will be charged with putting together teams to work those stations to help reset the tone at those stations. It's not the first time. When we started the neighborhood coordination offices up in District 12, we had a problem at the Pelham Bay station. One of our MTA partners said, if you come here at 7 in the morning, I'm telling you, you'll see 20 or 30 people go right through the gate. So we went back at 7, the NCOs went back at 7 in the morning, and they pulled about 20 to 30 people going through the gate, not paying, brought them over to the side and said, listen up, new sheriff in town, this is my station, we're going to give you a break this time, but you better start paying. So they gave them a warning, and from what we got back from our transit partner there, they are paying a lot more than they used to. So often a warning and the threat of arrest can solve it, not always, but it can help.
And the downside to all of this fare evasion is, without those turnstile counts, when ops planning looks and wants to adjust service, they'll say, well, look, they're not riding as much here, when in fact they're just not paying as much here.
You're right. Yeah. You're right. You have that. You have the resources, the impact on resources for transit, and the fact that, you know, I'm not sure that all the parents out there get this, but when I see a parent go through a gate with a child, are they sending the right message? It is a crime. Even though we'll often give you a summons, you can be arrested for it. Many are, and it is a crime. So, sorry, yeah.
Are your NCOs in uniform, or are they?
Yes. So the Transit Bureau is very unique in one way. More than half of, in order for an NYPD officer to take off that uniform and work plain clothes, they need special training. The Transit Bureau has more than half of the Bureau qualified to go into plain clothes. So the answer is yes, the NCOs work in uniform, but to do these operations, they may dress down. So, I mean, you're not going to catch 99 people going through a gate if you're standing there in uniform. What you'll do is, for that 2-hour period on that day, they won't do it. But the next day, they don't see you. They see people going through, they will do it again. So the idea is to interrupt and change the behavior. Yes?
In 1990, when I worked at New York City Transit, I participated in an ad campaign for the Bust Bus. And I was wondering if that still exists, or have you thought about bringing it back, so that you could, if you do go to a station and do a sweep like that, and there are 20 people that need to be, you know.
Oh, you're talking about the transit bus, the
Yeah,
mass
the
arrest
bus,
bus.
the bus.
Yes, yeah, yes.
I have an ad that I was in, that was in subway stations, that says, if you're looking for a free ride, we'll book you. And it was so that the bus would go to a station where they knew there was rampant fare evasion, and they would, you know, book the people right there instead of taking the time to take them all to central booking or whatever did
Yes,
happen.
we no longer have that bus. I do recall using it when I worked in the Bronx. In fact, the 1996 World Series, we asked transit to help us out, and they brought the bus, as you call it, or we call it the mass arrest processing bus. And we, I like bus. I've never heard that used, but it certainly is nice. But so we did use it back then for what we had back then was rampant scalpers. So we had a lot of people with serious criminal histories that would take a break from robbing that day and just sell tickets at Yankee Stadium. And then some of them, in the course of selling tickets, would victimize some of the people going there as well. So we brought the transit mass arrest bus over there to deal with that then. That was my last experience with it. But since I'm in transit, we no longer have a mass arrest bus. We do have buses, but not equipped with all the computers that was equipped with years ago. Yes, ma'am?
The schools and the school kids, I know many years ago when I was here, we did a program with, it wasn't the Department of Education, it was with the Board of Education, because that problem that you just talked about existed 30 years ago. I mean, it always goes on. Kids just want to see if they can get away with something. But once they were told, and it was part of the curriculum, and the teachers were asked to instruct it, because it was mostly the kids in junior high, what
High
was then
schools,
called
yeah,
junior
yeah,
high school,
yeah.
but now I guess you call it middle school, but around, you know, the preteens and the just getting to be teens, that they wanted to show they can beat the system. But once they were told that and the term that was used was, you will be arrested if you don't, you know, if you try to beat the fare. Have you thought of doing anything with the Department of Education in terms of educating these young people, since I didn't realize that it was still going on to
Yes.
the extent that you're talking about?
Yes, so absolutely. So my history goes back to Staten Island, and I worked very well with the Department of Education there on the drug opioid crisis. We did implement training there for all the children of Staten Island in school. It's a program called Too Good for Drugs. We team taught it with them. So the first answer to your question is yes, I have been thinking about it. There is a school right near that station in Queens, in Flushing, a high school where those kids came from. So we did go back to that school to speak to that principal, but I've been thinking in a broader sense about how to communicate with the DOE to possibly send them a letter or ask the police commissioner to send them a letter somehow to get that message out to the kids that they have the Metro cards, they have to use them. So, and again, it's not a revenue issue, but it is a number count issue, and it is something that creates a perception of lawlessness within a station and encourages other people to do something that they might not otherwise do.
Just a suggestion, which is that rather than going to the individual schools, you go to the BO and ask them to include this in their, they all have school-wide assemblies once a week or once a month or whatever, and just to include this either by having somebody from your force going or just the teachers or whoever, the principal running it, to do it, because I think that once they get the message, and you can even throw out some numbers, how many have been arrested, how many have been caught, or whatever, it'll get through. I know it worked before.
You run
Yep.
the risk of losing your student Metro card if you do this.
That's really
I mean,
good.
there are all kinds of things that, I'm not trying to tell you what to
Let's
say.
get to Stuart because the chief's time is really limited. So.
Hi,
Yep.
Chief.
That's a great idea, though. Thank you.
Besides fare evasion, what are some of the other police matters that you're getting through the
the community referrals? You know, and
Well, through community referrals, we're getting all sorts of things. I can tell you that one of the things that really struck me hard was the issues that the disabled community has to deal with. And what we did is, once I was tuned into it, you know, and it was, I don't want to get into the longer story about how it happened, but what we wound up doing is we wound up bringing all our neighborhood coordination officers in for training, and we brought in Alex, and Alex brought in leaders. Yes, and you participated, of course. So you were there. So I thought that was terrific training. I thought for the officers to become more aware of the challenges that our disabled community has to deal with day to day, and it's all sorts of stuff from somebody dirtying an elevator or a lift that a disabled person has to use, to the way the officers respond to some people who are disabled. There's so many different things covered. I thought the training was tremendous, and I thought after all the years I have, as you heard, that even I actually was, you know, I learned some things there that were really critical, I thought. So we're taking that training that we thought was so good, and we're now creating a video out of it to ensure that every officer within the Transit Bureau gets trained on it as well. So the other thing I'm going to talk about very quickly is delays. So the NYPD, first responders, obviously a part of the issue of delays. People get injured on trains, people fall on tracks, people jump on tracks. There were other injuries on trains. There were crimes committed on trains where law enforcement has to step in and act. So the key is, and again, I credit Andy Byford for a lot of this, in discussions, is how long do we have to really hold the train there to do this? And how much of this can we take the train somewhere else to complete? And I get called all night by Andy and Sally when we have delays out there, and they're questionable, and I will follow up with the officers on the scene and find out if we really need to keep the train there. So what we finally did is we finally created a training video. So we have this whole system in the NYPD where we create a video, we put it online, and then the officers are mandated to go online and view it, and then we can account for them viewing it or not viewing it. So we created a training video that dealt with the handling of the train during these crises and how best to do it and what the officers can and should be doing. Andy participated in that video as well. I was in the video. And then we gave really good instruction to the officers. So I would say about 99.5% of the Transit Bureau officers viewed it. There was about 40 that haven't, but they maybe out sick or away for other reasons. But they were mandated to view it, and they have. And then beyond that, I spoke to the chief of training and said, hey, you know what? We're not the only ones who run into the train station. Sometimes topside cops come in too. So now it's been opened up for all the precincts to view as well. So they're now going to get a little more educated on it, and the chief of training is going to build that into the academy training as well. So everybody has an understanding. We're police officers. We're used to, responding to a crime and saying the crime scene is the most important thing right now, so everything else we're not going to think about, really. We just want to make sure that we take care of this crime scene and any victims or any people in the area who may be impacted. Well, now we have them thinking about the other people impacted by the crime scene, and that's our ridership, because there are a lot of other people that are impacted. And I think it's going in the right direction. Sorry.
We have an interest in. Sorry, thanks. We have an interest in the Lex 59th Street station, and wondering, as a station that gets tremendously overcrowded, and wondered, how are you set up to respond to the extreme overcrowding because of a delay and that sort of thing, and the communication that occurs with the station and that?
Right. So one of the things we have is rail control, and I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but at rail control we have a sergeant assigned there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we have a captain assigned there as well. So rail control is our central point of communication with transit. And whenever these issues arise, they're usually when you have that overcrowd, it's because something happened. there's a delay somewhere. That's all fed to us through rail control, and it's brought out to us in the districts, and the districts would then respond there with extra personnel or with a plan if we needed to. Sometimes we actually have to work with transit and the MTA, and buses have to come in to relocate people off the platforms and stuff. So we all coordinate that through our own rail control system that's actually run by the MTA, transit. Yeah.
The speed of being able to do that, so we find that like an extreme delay can happen in just 8 minutes because you have an excessive number of 4 or 5 trains coming in there, and if there's a holdup on the NRW where all these people are transferring, the speed with which the communication to buses and handling that crowd at Midtown, how hard it is to get the extra crew there to be handling it and know what's going on.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it's a challenge, but I only handle the NYPD response side. But we do coordinate through rail control, and I've seen it happen where they've been very good at getting buses brought over there and you know, to deal with these. But, you know, I think if I was stuck at that station, I don't think any time period would be fast enough for me. And I think that's generally the feeling people are going to get. But it does take some time to you know, for the MTA side, it would take some time to bring buses over there. We can get officers there fairly quick, but once they get there, we're only there to stabilize and help control the crowds and keep people away from the tracks.
But do you get involved in closing a station or a platform, preventing
Yes.
people from going down?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
I know you have to go, so let me ask you one last question. We learned that the slam gates are being examined for whether they're actually locking, if the mechanisms are actually locking them, or do you think it would make any sense to reinstitute the alarms that were on the slam gates?
Actually, that is on one of my points to discuss with the Transit Task Force. I'm on a couple of different fare evasion task forces. I do believe that it makes sense to draw attention somehow to anyone walking through a gate. It doesn't have to be a fire alarm that blasts through the whole station, but I think people should know that if they're going through a gate and they're not paying, that somehow attention is going to be drawn to that. You know, if you go through a red light with your car, you feel the flash, and boy, that annoys you because now you're wondering, am I ever going to get that ticket in the mail, right? Well, there's different ways to draw attention to that gate. One of the other things that we're doing with transit, which I think is going really well, is we've created signage to go around the gate because the gate has signage, well, some limited words on it, but when that gate's open, there's nothing that can be viewed again. So now that if you're hurting or if you're an out-of-towner showing up there and for some reason you think you can just walk through the gate, there's nothing that it says don't because the gate's open. So transit has now put up signs around the gates, and we're at a point now where a sign has been approved to put on the ground, a very large sign. So if you were to walk through the gate, you would see the sign on the ground that warns you that if you haven't paid, you could be subject to arrest or a fine. So I think there's a lot of little things like that, technologically, signage, different things like that, that we can put in that'll certainly help reinforce what we're trying to get done.
No hurting signs.
Yeah, yes, no hurting,
Chris, you're
exactly.
in. He has to go.
I understand. I'm going to be quick. The one thing that I hope we are working on also is not just fare evasion, but the homeless level. We've been seeing that them smoking in train stations. Definitely during the holiday train in the morning and during going down on the F line from even to East Broadway. And I'm glad you mentioned about something in Queens because there's been issues with Queens as well with them going through the gate and they're claiming they're MTA. No, they're claiming they're the cops, and I'm looking at them like, no, you're not. I'm not touching it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to work our way around the city as the group station managers alert us to where their most serious conditions are. We're starting with the most serious, which are often going to be your big hubs, your two-fare zones, where 3 or 4 buses come in with hundreds of people unloading and going up. And that's, you know, in crowds, some people enjoy a little more anonymity and get a little more courageous and are more willing to break the law, unfortunately. So that's what we're working on that end. that's, I don't know if that answered your question, but at the same time, we do have our eye on the what I would call the quality of life conditions that exist in the transit system. That's why the NCOs have been charged with this. And, it's, I personally was with somebody when we picked somebody up off a train a couple of weeks ago and brought him in, and found out after the fact that the person was homeless, but when we picked them up, we had no idea. So it's not always that clear, those who need services on the system, but our goal is to find people who need services, or when we come across them, and to connect them to the services they need, whatever those services may be. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're going to stay, right, Vinny? Are you leaving too? Are you staying or leaving? Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you're gonna go with me? Yeah, you're gonna stay. You're gonna go with me, right? Yeah. Okay, do you need him here for now? Okay.
Thanks.
Listen, again, thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here with all of you. And thanks for coming to our disabled meeting as well. Thank you. Happy holidays. Happy holidays to everybody.
Okay, we will continue with the meeting now, with the chair's report. Needless to say, there's a lot going on. This is the last meeting of 2018. We've had some pretty good accomplishments in 2018 that merit recapping. TRC members and staff have attended meetings and forums on Andy Byford's Fast Forward plan, and we continue to weigh in at committee meetings and public meetings. In the coming year, we'll raise our voices in support of recurring, sustainable funding and legislative actions to pay for the sorely needed resources to support his plan. We've attended bus redesign forums in Staten Island and the Bronx, and will continue to share the feedback we receive with Darrell and his team. I will provide more information on upcoming meeting dates and times with him very shortly, like in this. So, fear not. In this, okay? We spoke at every fare hike hearing with the message of no service cuts. We cannot go backwards and negate the progress that has been made. We all remember June 27th of 2010 as if it was yesterday. We understand there will be fare hikes. We're not certain of which option it will be, and those discussions are quite something at the board level, and are on the record as supporting the hikes as long as the increase option selected offers the fairest deal for transit's best and most frequent customers, the New Yorkers who ride the subway and buses every day. We've closely monitored plans for the L train shutdown, and Sheila Benesh, a regular rider of that line, will be on the ground as service changes and at the launch so that we can offer input once the changes go into effect. I assume you won't be biking too much? Yeah. PCA staff is also testing a social media analysis method called sentimental analysis to better understand what riders are saying about the L service changes in real time. They've been communicating closely with transit staff who are interested in our demonstration project. We'll have a demonstration of the project early next year. Members and staff have also been on the front lines in the fight to improve accessibility for system users. Andy's plan to make every station accessible in the next 5 years is ambitious and requires a lot of funding, but it's a laudable goal that we support. At the same time, Carol is continuing to work with Alex and his staff on a range of accessibility projects and goals. Progress continues on the 100 Days and Nights report with a meeting earlier this week on crowding metrics that Ellen and Bradley held with the GSM for Lexington 59th Street Station. They also met again with Sarah Meyer to discuss additional signage and communication and marketing efforts. We'll keep you posted on that project as it moves forward. Bradley, Lisa, and I met with Phil Eng for an update on Atlantic Ticket and to discuss marketing and communications efforts. We are awaiting some additional information from them related to those efforts, but also expect release of a field study of users early in the new year that will help formulate a strategy for next steps and improvements to outreach and service. I don't know what that means. But outreach the service. Anyway, Ellen testified before the City Council's Transportation Committee meeting regarding the need for funding for the Fast Forward plan and the need to secure sustainable funding sources for the system as a whole. I am sure that you've read the Governor's Sustainability Working Group was released earlier this week. Well, their report, yeah. The group was established to highlight issues and recommend actions wherever possible that state and local government could take to deal with the many challenges confronting the region's transit system, including congestion, and to recommend sustainable funding sources. At the end of 16 weeks, the group was able to come to consensus on only 2 recommendations: congestion pricing and reforming the governance structure of the MTA. That the 10 members could not agree on any of the other strategies it discussed is disappointing, to say the least. We had a long wait for this. Lisa and Ellen attended the report's release and issued a statement immediately afterward that said, clearly the MTA's fiscal situation is dire and every funding option must be considered carefully, including but not only congestion pricing. Finding efficiencies in the MTA's organizational structure deserves a close look. We're disappointed we did not hear details about aggressive value capture options, including recouping funds from Amazon for transit infrastructure funding. This report is a step in the right direction, and we look forward to working closely with our members and the riders we represent to continue the conversation, and with elected officials to enact the legislative reforms necessary to support our vital transit system and keep the New York region globally competitive. That was our statement, huh?
We had 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. I had the opportunity to speak before the group along with John Raskin from Riders Alliance. Even though the working group is well aware of who we are, no mention of rider or labor non-voting board representatives, all of whom have made substantive recommendations to the board, were included in the report. When they described the MTA, no mention of rider or labor members. Pretty amazing. And they also mentioned that the so-called quarter pounders, you know, no mention that the legislation has changed so that if just one of them shows up, they get a vote.
Andrew, what about putting that in writing to them?
We are.
And
We're putting all of
we
that in a
send-
response. I spoke to Pat Foy about that
No,
this
but-
morning, too.
Okay, because
That's the next.
Yeah. The only substantive recommendation that ended up being included was congestion pricing. PCAC staff is undertaking an in-depth review of the report and its recommendations, which will be shared with MTA leadership and the public, including, of course, all of you. We have some copies of the report here if you'd like to take one, and you can also find it online at pcac.org. As I mentioned, we have received dates and times that the bus folks, including Darrell, is available to meet with us. Now, please, we need to finalize this today. So here's the dates. January 30th, 11 to 12, 12 to 1, 1 to 2, or 2 to 3, or January 31st from 2 to 3. Whichever one works for the majority of folks, we will finalize today. The 30th, what kind of a day is it? Sunny with a chance of snow. Wednesday is the 30th, and the 31st is a Thursday. We do, but what they're saying for the 31st is 2 to 3, so if we go from 12 to 2, we'd be in the building already. Does that work for folks?
that makes the most sense, I think.
Means we'll finish on time, that's for sure. 31st from 2 to 3, going once? Yeah, no, it's 30th floor is where we meet with them. Well, you have to go up to 30. Yes, so that's the consensus, the 31st at 2 p.m., yes? Okay. Finally, we had some great guest speakers in 2018. Andy Byford, Jano Lieber, Sally Librera, Rochelle Glazer, John McKay, to name a few. Our final speaker of the year is an excellent addition to the group, as you heard. And we will continue to have some great speakers in 2019. Okay, now let me get into the board report. So, as all of you have heard, I am sure, there was a vote on the budget. There was an agonizing or agonized discussion prior to that vote, agonizing also, yeah, I guess both would fit, about whether a vote for the budget meant a vote for the fare hike, because the budget assumes the fare hike going forward.
That's what we raised that.
Yes. The chief financial officer made it clear that should the board vote for the budget but decline to vote for the fare hike when they meet in January, something else could take that approximately $308 to $312 million that the fare hike is worth and substitute for that, or there could be adjustments to things. That discussion went on for quite a while. The governor's point person on the board, Larry Schwartz, as you read in the news, no doubt, choked up a little bit because he had a medical procedure he had to go to, and asked the board if they would please take the vote so that he could be there for the vote. They could continue the discussion after the vote, but he had to go, which they did. And so the budget was approved. There is much discussion among members in that little room back there when we have our pre-meetings and meals before or between meetings. Everybody has an idea of what they would like to see for an option A and an option B, and they are not at all what the ones that have been presented to the public yet are. So expect to see some changes in those. I will also be making a recommendation, which I've gotten some interesting feedback about, so we will see what happens with those.
Andrew, question.
Yes.
Are you talking now about other sources of income or other sources of expense cutting?
There is some discussion about holding off a vote on the fare hike pending action by the legislature, which would likely happen prior to April, and then taking the vote on fare hike options in April, which would mean not till June when those would actually be in effect, which would be 3 months, which would be approximately $75 to $90 million hit on if the vote took place in January and the fare hike went into effect in March. And so that $75 to $90 million could be found somewhere, but we don't know where. So there is some sentiment to waiting to see what happens. There is some sentiment that says if you do that, will the legislature resent that you didn't do your own thing before they had to act? So, there's two schools of thought on both. It's not an easy thing.
Andrew,
Yes.
could you share with us your thoughts and your recommendations?
Yeah,
since you're representing us?
I've run it by a few people, and Andy actually said they've tried this in Toronto and it was successful. After hearing some of the comments at several of the fare hike hearings, in particular the Staten Island hearing, and how so many people have found their services delayed and having had to be issued a three-legged transfer to make up for their vehicle being late and not connecting in time with another, I'm going to make a suggestion, which many people thought was a good one, which is from the time of your first swipe, you have unlimited rides for 2 hours. That would actually take into account people from Staten Island, people from the Rockaways, people from Eastern Queens, and people from the Northern Bronx who, for one reason or another, their service is not working. They've missed a transfer. They need to transfer to something else to complete their journey. That would show that at least MTA is hearing the complaints about fares, service, and is giving something back. So right now, that first swipe is good for a bus to a subway, or obviously as many subway connections, or a bus to a bus. But if you have a problem en route, you would have to be issued a three-legged transfer to go from a bus to a subway to another bus, or vice versa. So I think, unlimited ride, after the first swipe, 2-hour unlimited ride, I think would be the way to go. And Andy has said they have done that in Toronto, and Toronto's distances are not even nearly as great as ours.
I thought the
Andrew?
subway to subway was only if it was a connecting line.
Yeah, it is.
But if it's, that's not
But-
the same.
Well, every line connects to every other line somewhere, to be quite honest. It's just not necessarily where you
Right.
think that, like Livonia Junius, for instance. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Andrew, do you think that in any way that will ameliorate the sense of the public in terms of paying more? Whether, fine, you're giving them a little something.
I think it
But-
shows that you don't have a tin ear and that you're going to give something back. But, whether it's enough, I don't know what the final two fare options will be. There are people including myself, who thought if you could bring a higher rate of bonus, raise the base fare, but keep the accessoride fare at its current level, or increase the accessoride fare to the same level that everyone else is getting an increase versus a 9% increase, which is what many have estimated it would be. There's got to be like smorgasbord here, some from part A and part B, and that's what people are talking about. So the discussion is ongoing for sure.
And the last question is that there are many people in the legislature, and especially a lot of incoming people, who feel that they do want to have their voice heard. You've heard it over and over again. So that, why do you think that there would be objection to delaying, coordinating what the MTA board does with what the legislature is doing?
Well, keep in mind that if they were to pass congestion pricing, that goes into the capital budget, doesn't go into the expense budget. You'd still have to do something for the fares.
I'm not talking about that. I am talking about many members of the legislature, especially a lot of new people I'm talking about in the state Senate, are saying that they want to have a voice in whatever the fare. They're not just talking about congestion pricing. That's one part of it. And there's also talk about having part of congestion pricing proceeds going towards operating as well as capital. But what they are saying is that they want to be a part of whatever happens with raising the fare. They want to have more of a voice. And so when you just said that there are people up, who are objecting, I'm wondering if you're hearing the other voice, or the board.
No, I'm sure
is
that there's
hearing
a
the
sizable
other voices.
contingent that are saying what you're saying as well. Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, I wanted to add, we were at all of the different fair hearings, and there were maybe altogether 5 electeds, or soon to be, or elected but not yet in office. There are a lot of ways to include your voice. The fact that they didn't come out was really disappointing.
It was.
I'm talking about the people who
Lisa,
are. Judy, I'm sorry, I'm still
go
speaking.
ahead. I'm sorry, I thought you were finished.
There's leadership in that. That would have been a really good time. There were TV cameras everywhere. There were print reporters everywhere, radio. You saw that. I mean, we saw Gail in Manhattan. That was it.
Lisa, you know, because you've been around almost as long as I have in that field, that they don't want to be when there is everybody else testifying and everybody else talking. They put out their press releases. They hold their own press conferences. They call people like me and others in the political process, and they get their voice out that way. They don't want to testify. They don't want to be there when everybody else
Staten
can
Island,
grab the cameras.
5 elected officials came. Yeah.
Okay, but all I'm saying, in most cases, and the people with the loudest voices and the ones that get the most media attention will not show up at the fair hearings. They will not. They'll do their own thing. So I'm just trying to share with you what has been shared with me because of my other life, not my MTA life, but my other life.
Yep.
Trudy, I did, having gone to a lot of fair hearings now, it was so starkly different from all the other fair hearings where they did come. And the other thing that's dropped off quite a bit in recent years, which is a changing atmosphere, is what it sounds like you're describing a bit, is even at the committee meetings, elected officials on important points, even if they don't come directly, they'll send somebody giving testimony. The amount being heard from elected officials, both at the fair and at the committee meetings, has really dropped off. And they're great forums that then gets piped out through the press. So it's a changing atmosphere.
We live in an age of social media, and they put out their tweets, they go on Facebook, they go on Instagram. They don't want to go where they want to have their own little forum. Believe me, it's not only with transit, it's not only with fare, it's with so many other issues.
Okay.
And that's the new world, the brave new world that we now live in.
Go ahead, Marisol.
But with all of that said, that's still allowing your voice to be heard, whether it's tweeting. Everybody's paying attention to that anyway, so they are making their voices heard in some shape or form, even if it's not at the hearing. I think that what's been happening at the hearings and with the fair hearings is that they already are assuming that a fare hike has to happen. So some of it is, it's got to happen. Let's see how it plays out with the people that are using it, the commuters for the most part. But I think it's disconcerting that they would have to wait if they know that the money is needed up front. A lot of the new elected officials that are coming in, they've been very vocal on all of the issues because that's how a lot of them got elected.
Yeah.
So they could step into it in January and just take whatever decision they're going to take in January. So I
Yes,
guess you could
because
go either way. 'Cause
The legislature
how are you gonna make up the money?
reconvenes in early January. The MTA board is scheduled to vote on the fare hike the last week of January. So there is time for the legislature to make it known that they would like to see action in some direction, or ask the MTA to wait while they formulate their proposal. So, there is almost 3 weeks to get the message out.
I think that they're already trying to get that done too, at some level.
You can.
One of the other things that was really interesting through this last round was that board member Veronica Vanderpool introduced a resolution that would change the timing of the MTA's budget year, so that instead of being calendar year, because the state is April 1st, the city is July 1st, the feds are October 1st, and all our funding sources. So not knowing what the funding, what the resources are going to be, I think puts an additional burden on trying to make that decision.
Keeping in mind that the MTA does a preliminary budget in July, another one in October, and a final vote in December, those months would now be in another weird time of the year vis-a-vis
Right.
the other two state and city. So you would still have that not in sync, but you at least have a little better idea.
Right.
Yeah. So,
I think that's going to be voted on in January also.
yes, it definitely will. Discussed it, yeah. So, one of the things that came up at the Staten Island fare hike hearing, which was brought up by Borough President Otto, was how he enjoyed working with the bus folks on the Staten Island Express bus redesign, how it is still a work in progress. And Darrell mentioned at the last meeting how they are continuing to tweak it to make it work better for everybody. Some people like the speed but don't like that they have much further to go for a stop. It's a work in progress, and they're very flexible about it. And it was good to hear the borough president think that the process was. He really is involved in it. I heard him.
The issue is on Staten Island. You get in a bus, you get to the Staten Island Expressway. This morning there was a overturned car on a Gowanus, and 3 tractor trailers ran into each other. And you're done. You're done. So you get on the bus to Staten Island, you're going pretty quick, you hit the Staten Island Expressway, and you're finished. So.
Last night there was a backup on the BQE Gowanus, almost from the Verrazano Bridge all the way to Williamsburg. That's how bad. Something must have happened.
Yeah, but you can tweak the bus system service all you want. Once you get in the bottleneck, it doesn't matter how good the bus is. You're just sitting there.
Right. So, have you heard anything about the routing via New Jersey and the Lincoln Tunnel about being a faster route for folks than the Verrazano and?
Even though they're doing work in a viaduct, they got a lane closed. It's actually quicker. Some people take the express bus to Midtown and take the subway downtown.
It's faster to even do that. Wow.
But if you get on the I think the best bus to have is the SIM2. That makes like 4 stops, and if the Gowanus is good, it flies right in.
Yeah.
But other people are better off taking the Midtown bus through the tunnel and taking the subway downtown. They don't want to do it, but it's more convenient.
Yes.
Are they going to do any change? Because as being on the other hat, being with OPWDD, we have some people who work across the street from here. Still wanted to know, is there any express buses still going to go to Port Richmond? Not that much. There's times that a scheduled bus was supposed to be there, never shows up. Not because of the accident. It's because of
I
drivers
haven't heard
out.
anything that would say that there aren't going to be any.
Well, just to let you know, there's one guy, I was in Queens and I mentioned it to you, or I mentioned it to Bradley. Some guy's claiming, and I don't halfway believe him, but it's been stressing other people out. They're saying that there's discontinuing the express buses in Port Richmond, which I think is as a bloody lie. And I'm saying it that way. See?
And you just said that because you wanted to sound like Andy Byford, didn't you? Yeah.
The gang saying it now lately.
One of the amazing thing about attending all 5 of the borough fare hike hearings, there was one. Well, obviously, don't raise the fare was the overwhelming message, or give us better service before you do that. But one of the other coming together of all 5, all 5 boroughs was fare evasion. There was more talk about fare evasion and how can you ask for a hike when all these people are going through without paying. And believe me, the people at the dais were really listening to that message. Yes.
It was a question I was wondering, is the chief going to give a monthly report now on fare evasion with all these things he's doing to be able to watch the
I'm getting the
progress?
impression that he is.
If the board has called for that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And unlike some would characterize it, it is all walks of life that are walking through the slam gate. It is far from just poor people, people in suits, families, grandmothers, everybody's doing it. So, yes, there is, yes.
So I know he was talking about fare evasion on the trains, but a lot of it is also happening on the buses.
And through the front door, not even the rear door.
But I got like a few letters that came into the office about people getting in through the back because the bus drivers are opening all the doors to allow the riders to come onto the
We're not
bus.
supposed to do that.
But that's
Unless
what
it's an
they're
R-tick.
That's what they're doing because it's so overcrowded and I guess it's still bunching in some areas. I know one bus for.
I reported a bus that was opening rear doors. It was not an SBS,
No.
but it was an R-tick, and it was on 3rd Avenue, I believe, and I reported it to Darrell, and he called. I gave him the bus number, and he called the driver, and he told the
But-
driver, "Don't do that."
But
That
it's happening.
happened-
I'm sorry, Trudy. It's happening on some of the routes in the Bronx. So what's happening is because the bus drivers are doing that, a lot of the commuters are getting used to that.
When you get a report of that, do they give you the number of the vehicle?
They did not. But they just said that it's a pattern. So what's happening, of course, is now the enforcement is happening, and they're like, now I'm getting a ticket, but it's not necessarily fair because this is a practice. They're not
Well,
saying.
let's be honest. If you're a
Let me
regular
finish.
rider, you know you have to pay your fare.
No, absolutely. But what's happening is because the bus drivers are allowing that to happen, listen, they understand that they got a ticket and that they have to pay it. But in some cases, their assumption was that if they go in through the back, they would then go put in their MetroCard. But that's not what's happening.
No.
But my concern is that if they're doing that on the buses and there's more than a couple of the routes, then that's kind of like setting up. It's almost like setting up people as well.
They're not supposed to.
So that has to be resolved.
And you may
Andrew,
wait 1 sec. You may recall that I told you that I was at 145th and Broadway, and the BX19 goes from there into the Bronx. I saw a guy bang on the back door. This is not an R-tick. It's a regular length bus. Somebody opened the back door. 40 people piled in the back door.
Yeah, the herders, as you
Yeah.
said.
And Andrew, you said you saw one bus, this happened on 3rd Avenue. let me tell you that this happens with alarming regularity. I have gone on the 101, 102, and 103, and one of the reasons is that you have SBS on 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue, and people just see the same kind of bus on 3rd Avenue and Lexington Avenue, because I've asked, I mean, people I know
Don't the fact
who
that
have
there's
gone.
no machines on the
It
side?
doesn't matter. I'm telling you because I have done my own little surveys when I have the time.
SBSs look different,
people,
too.
Andrew, I am telling you my own observations and my own little surveys when it happens. And I have spoken to, I'm going to give you 2 bus drivers that I'm commending, who I've talked, and both of them I talked to about this situation. But I am telling you, and then not only do you have the SBS on 1st Avenue and 2nd Avenue, but you also have it on 79th Street and on 86th Street, right across, all across from each other. So people are just assuming, and they're assuming, they don't even think about whether they can buy a ticket on the sidewalk, that they can just go in. And unless there is something done about it, you're going, and it's not conscious fare evasion anymore.
Right.
I mean, when we get to new fare payments, that will change, but at the
well,
moment.
I think Carol, the point that Carol brought up earlier of the bus busting bus is an opportunity where both you can, bus wrap it so that it's visible and makes people aware with the note, the rear door getting on and on the buses could be effective. So maybe in the meeting with Daryl, talking about the
definitely gonna
fare
raise this.
evasion and the bus busting bus could be an opportunity. What do you think?
Can also have some of the, I call them the Gestapo, but what do they
Eagle
call
team.
those people?
Eagle team.
The what team?
Eagle.
The Eagle team. Okay. I'm sorry, because of my own experiences with them way back. Anyway, but the Eagle team, maybe some of them can be assigned to, especially at 79th Street and at 86th Street, to 3rd Avenue and Lexington Avenue, where this occurs the most, at the cross streets, and to just let people know this is not a, you have to pay a fare.
Now that you raised that issue, I neglected to bring up that the chief has announced that the disbursement of the Eagle team will be changed to a borough-wide approach, so you will not know where they will show up next. They're fairly predictable up until now. Like I know on the M86 where they are on the eastbound and on the westbound, but they will be less predictable going forward.
You did say at the last final meeting, you did say the Eagle teams are also not just be dealing with the SBS, but also the local buses
will.
as well.
Yep.
But I have to say, I have seen them already at the Kings Highway areas, and I have to tell you, the Eagle teams have been catching at least 6 to 8 people, and they're not students; they're actually adults.
Not surprised.
And it's a miracle to see the students actually paying their fare. I'm like, what am I drinking this morning? I'm like, whoa.
What are you
Carol?
drinking this morning?
Coffee.
I think it's interesting that the issue of broken fare boxes on buses is not raised, because I've been on a number of buses where they stick in a Metro card so you can, the bus driver puts his hand over it,
Yep.
not pay, and that happens quite a bit. And I think that's, I think it's just not the subways. The buses have to be addressed, and it would be interesting to see, how many kids get on, and again, don't pay, not that they don't swipe their card, so that again, you don't know who's riding the bus.
Well, I was really surprised when they gave the statistics at the last meeting, which when it comes to buses, more fare evaders are entering the front door than the rear door, and they're just, inviting the bus operator to do something. Yep. All buses. I was really shocked to hear that one. Let me just go on. The issue of Amazon and its non-payment to the infrastructure is going on. There are groups being formed in Long Island City. Lisa can give you a little more information about that, between elected officials, the bids, and other neighborhood groups as an ongoing thing. Amazon did testify sort of defiantly and not very willingly before the city council. You might want to speak to that. Yeah. They would not commit to coming back, although at the end they did. But, of course, Google also announced they'll be expanding in the meat. Yeah, although, yes, they're in Manhattan, down near New York One's headquarters. But do you want to say anything about Amazon since you went to some of those community meetings?
Sure, and Bradley also went to the Community Board 2, Queens Community Board 2 meeting a week or so ago, and it was, from what I understand, 100 speakers about Amazon. So there are a few things that are going. There is the
Long Island City's Community Board 1, though, isn't
Community Board 2.
it? Is it?
Yeah.
Where's one?
It
in Queens?
includes over to Astoria.
Oh, okay.
So there's an official working group that's been community advisory group that's been formed, and committees have been broken out among that one larger group. However, Councilman Van Bramer, Senator Generis, and a number of the local community leaderships have declined to participate on the working group because they oppose any and all means or methods of Amazon coming to the community. So I had the opportunity to ride with somebody from my local civic association and express to him my concern that now there's no voice of the people who are directly related, who represent those of us who live in Long Island City at the table. There still are people, but that they're losing a valuable opportunity, particularly to continue to stress the point that we need transit infrastructure funding. And this particular guy who's running for Jimmy Van Bramer's seat, as they're already announced, no secrets, said, oh, gee, maybe we should form our own committee. And I'm like, that's great, but we still need to get to the table. So we've been starting to do outreach to some of the working group members. The bid is, the woman who's in charge of the bid there is on the infrastructure committee, and I've had an opportunity in the past to work with her. So reaching out to her to see if there's a way that we can get on the table to the table, at least to get our voices heard there. The first Amazon council hearing was about the hidden process, the secrets. There are 2 more hearings that are scheduled. I think the last one will be about infrastructure. A lot has been said about other infrastructure in Long Island City being old and deteriorating and unable to handle an influx, including the sewer system. So one of the things that's particularly interesting that came out today, or came out, but it was, I heard on the news today, was it's not just Long Island City real estate that is taking a bump up, but Manhattan real estate, people who can get to Long Island City. And I think that that's something that we anticipate, that those of us, well, I say we who live there, anticipated. In addition, our landlords haven't come up to us and said, oh, we're going to have to triple your rent because Amazon is coming. Instead, I think that there is a big emphasis on ensuring that there is infrastructure, including schools, community centers, that the land that is being given to Amazon, some of which is outside the footprint of the buildings that they've indicated are going to be part of their campus. One was a school building, or one was a Department of Education property, and another is a DOT property that fall outside of the footprint, but are parcels that community has long advocated to include a community center and a school, and also a major resilience infrastructure park being built there. So I think to be continued, clearly, but we're going to continue to get our message out.
Is there a mailing list that you're now on? Or?
I'm on every mailing list that I can be on. Some I shouldn't be on, but I'm going to, going to be a little more vocal about our need to at least, have our message heard at the table.
Issue that just came, well, it didn't come up yesterday, but yesterday was the press conference about the firehouse and
Yes.
the fire company, because that has now become a major issue, because the fire unions are involved also.
Right.
And what the strategy seems to be, I won't say is because then I would know what it is, but anyway, what it appears to be is to focus on specific things like a firehouse, like a school, rather than just saying the whole thing sucks, you know, and that seems to be what the strategy is, starting yesterday with the firehouse and demanding not anything else, you know, about Amazon, but just saying that it housed two companies,
Right.
and that one has now been removed, and that they immediately, no matter what happens with Amazon, and that seems to be a strategy that is now being put into play.
So I did see that, and one of the, so there are different voices coming to the table now. So I know Carolyn was at that, but you noticed that Jimmy Van Bramer and Michael Gianaris were not there because that's not their issue. Their issue is no Amazon. So one of the things I think that has gotten lost in a lot of the conversation is that there's an anticipated increase of population of about 24,000 people over the next 2 years. Has nothing to do with Amazon. That these are new residential buildings that are being constructed, and that's about 12,000 units. So they're anticipating 24,000. I think there will be more because of more than one kid, and some and multiple family structures. Say that. So that there, that there's going to be, could certainly be upwards of 36,000 people coming, and that there aren't enough schools, and that there isn't enough fire safety protection. So those are absolutely relevant issues, as is transit infrastructure investment.
And as far as Jimmy Van Bramer or Mike Gianaris or a couple of others, just don't expect them to be participating in anything. This has become an issue for various reasons, and they're just against it. Period, exclamation point. That's it.
Chris, did you have something?
Yes. Lisa, when you're at these hearings, and because Edith asked me to ask you this, if they're only talking about accessibility stuff,
yes,
because
that's absolutely.
Just to ask the one question is, and you mentioned housing before, there has been a lot of new with the structured buildings. They do have to share some housing for people with disability and for seniors, because there is some new programs have coming down from not just Mayor's Office of Disability, but OPWDD and mental hygiene. All the other divisions are supposed to be working on home of your own. That's the name right now, unless they change it. But there has been a concern on, with Amazon, but at the same time, people building homes there, it's still going to be a little more congested in
Right. Well, I know that there's been a lot of conversation in our office, and Carol's actually been working on the next 50 stations accessibility project, and there are several that have been identified for greater accessibility.
That's one.
But everything that we say in relation to Amazon and transit infrastructure and investment includes accessibility, and all forms of accessibility, not solely elevators, but that's obviously critical, but wider platforms and other features that are that benefit the disability community and everyone.
And speaking of accessibility, I neglected to mention that 4 of the deepest stations in the system will be getting finally elevator replacements beginning January 5th at 168th Street on the number 1, which will be closed for a year. The 168th Street A and C stations will remain open, and they will stagger 168, 181, 190 on the A, and 191 on the 1. So those 4 stations, which are amongst the deepest in the system, will be getting finally new elevators, although the only stations that will be totally shut will be 168 and 181 on the 1. 191 on the 1 and 190 on the A will be staggered so that they will remain in service. So you'll still be able to get to Washington Heights with a deep elevator that's working. But
With buses.
yeah, and buses, right. But so that's it for me. Lisa, did you want to have a report, or do you not have one today, or do you want to have lunch?
One thing I have been, consistently talking, as you all know, I did want to bring up Scott has sent us a letter regarding Metro card machines on Staten Island that we would like to support. And that's something that's been discussed at this table here, among others, about the lack of MetroCard machines. I don't know if there's been a response. Okay. All right. Right.
No, went out this year. He sent a similar letter out last year, but now he sent one to Byford this year on the 17th, so I doubt there's a response yet.
Right. So but that's something that that we think that we've raised here and discussed and is important, and we'd like to
But
support
I spoke
that.
to him and told him the answer is going to be there's no available machines.
Right.
Unless you open a new station and they get 6 machines, then there's available machines.
Right. Well, there aren't until there are.
Exactly.
I can't imagine there are backup machines
Exactly.
somewhere.
There are. There's machines in a warehouse in Queens that no one talks about. They're just
Right.
sitting there.
So the machines are now older than they were, right? So they have to have machines that they cannibalize for parts.
Exactly
So
right.
they can rebuild a new one and make it better, faster, stronger, until the new fare system, payment system comes in.
Right.
Right. Right, right. I just want to add, when I went out with the chief just before, I asked if regarding the delay video, which they said that they've now shared with transit police and that they're sharing with the up top, right, teams. Topside, thank you.
Topside.
I asked if they had included the fire department in those and extended training to the fire department, and he said that, no, we have not, but that's interesting, and he was going to reach out and see if there was a way that they could re-edit the videos to include some of the fire department leadership so that they would show that there was, that they were together on that. So, fingers crossed, and we'll follow up with him on that.
Speaking of fire department, President Byford has indicated dissatisfaction with when there is a problem on a line, power is shut down on all tracks, and that's at the urging of the fire department. He would like the track that's affected to be shut down, which allows them to shuttle people around the problem, and he said he would be looking into that. So
I think that's what the chief is also. I think that's part of what the chief was going to also discuss with the fire department.
yeah, they all have to be on the same
Absolutely.
direction, or it's not going to work.
Safety first.
Yeah, yeah.
But if there's a way to do it safely, then absolutely.
Early next, well, maybe it's next March or April, in time for the L train shutdown, full CBTC and its beneficial effects will be felt on the 7 line when 2 to 3 additional trains per hour will be put in. I know that'll make you happy. Make Ira happy, too. Remember Ira?
I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay.
The trains still have to run.
They
right?
do, they do, they do.
Human caused delays are still the #1 cause
Yep,
of
yep.
those delays, and until we can communicate and computerize,
Yep.
people.
So the rollout of the new fare payment will begin in 2019 with bank-issued cards and phone apps, I believe, and some testing by employees in various places, but it won't be widespread in 2019 yet.
Andrew, because I think we've brought it up a few times and it's been received, that us being able to be part of the testing group for the
Yeah, I'm going to
rollout.
ask for that, of course.
And
Absolutely.
should,
Yep. All right, let's go to old business. Stuart.
One of the things we asked for from an earlier speaker was a schedule of cleaning of stations. And I don't believe you've communicated to us that we've received that. And it's a segue. I want to mention a similar item for new business. As part of my business, I happen to be at the Franklin Avenue Shuttle Terminal, and there's profound bird poo and feathers littering the escalator.
You mean the Franklin Avenue and Fulton Street end of the shuttle?
That's correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
okay.
the other end has a different name. I'll be like him now. There's profound filth, and they're not cleaning it. So you could see it on the escalator itself. You could see it on the walls and windows of the canopy that surrounds the escalator. It doesn't appear that they're doing really any station cleaning at all, and it looks.
Well, after tomorrow, it should be all gone because we're getting 2.5 inches of rain.
Hopefully, it won't rain in the station. So, but it looks like it needs. But again, back to the original issue, which was, we saw a change in a decrease in cleaning and cleaning schedules when we asked for that, and it hasn't been forthcoming.
Yeah, it has not come yet, but we will ask again.
Maybe before after, before this budget and after.
So we have asked for that, and we'll follow up again. Our understanding was that there was an announcement or internal training. It depends on what you heard, because we hadn't actually gotten any official word, but that there was a deep station cleaning conference or confab or something in this building. Rumor has it that the governor was there.
Yeah, he was.
Or the governor was there, but it wasn't a press event, or he was there for something else. We don't know, because it hasn't been.
It didn't make the news.
Didn't make
after
the
that,
news, so
interestingly, but
then it may not have been a news.
But they're
conference,
talking about steam cleaning walls, ceilings, even inside the light fixtures. It doesn't sound like it will.
So my understanding was that there might be like an hour or two of a shutdown.
Oh. Okay.
Overnight, but that it would also be coincided with GOs.
Well, that would make the most sense,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah.
I think this comes into some of the board discussion that happened around the budget.
But we're all gonna
which
sit like
is
Sheila.
one thing that they didn't put when they put the budget out or on the fair information was what happens if you don't? What happens when that whole of 350 million or whatever it is that's to be raised by the fairs? What happens if that doesn't come in? And I believe that the presidents were asked to do their tier one of sort of cost reductions, which were to try and be the least painful. But I think it's important for us as a group to keep an eye on things like the cleaning, the schedule now, and what was hoped for, and what might come to be. And the other area of real concern, which in the past has been the first thing to cut because you don't see it immediately, is the accuracy, the accountability departments that account for how service is going.
Which is it? Accuracy, accountability, or what?
All of that. There are these things of benchmarking,
You gave 3 A's
and
there, but
it's the support staff that's able to evaluate how anything is going, and it's a very easy group to cut.
Well, President Byford made it pretty clear that his least significant cut would be the non-cleaning of trains at both terminals. It'll
Yeah.
be one or the other.
Yeah, but I think it's worrisome on the transparency front and accountability front of what the head counts are and where they came from for that first tier. So that's all.
Chris?
As we're still talking about old business, I mentioned this I think a few months ago, not following, but a couple of months ago, about the cleaning up some of the elevators. Like one of them I was going to mention, I want to thank Stuart because at least I'm not the only one looking at Franklin Avenue. But it is beginning. The only way I can have to go through Franklin Avenue, luckily I carry hand sanitizer, I have to put it in my face and go, because it's really foul. Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
your voice is so muffled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's also related to asthma too, because some of that smell
Asthma too.
it's very foul. It's very, even, let me tell you, I sometimes don't even want to go over the Franklin Avenue show anymore because it's getting to be disgusting. And it's like the words I want to say, I don't want to say it. If they're going to clean the elevators, please, if you're going to power wash it, please do something to put some air freshener in that elevator, because this is like getting really disgusting to see this. And that's the only elevators I've been seeing on all the lines put together.
Okay.
I do
We're
see
reporting these
And I do see
observations.
approvals in other areas are getting clean, thank God. But
Yep.
that one is the worst.
Bert?
Quick question. Any idea when the countdown clocks on the Q trains are going to be available?
Yeah, I heard some were already.
Oh,
they've
yeah.
they've apparently fixed the power problem that was the reason that they weren't on, and I know some were turned on at 86th Street already, but only for the northbound, believe it or not. So you'll know when the train is coming to go to 96th Street if that was your.
Andrew,
Yes.
sporadically at 80s, I checked it out after it was brought up, and I spoke to some people. I do my own little surveys when I have the time, and it was working, and then I went over there one day, nothing.
Okay.
And I asked some people, and I asked actually what do you call it, whatever, the people in the
Booth
fare
agent.
booth, the booth agents, and they said they have had complaints because people were so happy, and then all of a sudden it stopped. So
Very
just
let
so
me
that
find
you
out.
know,
I will find out.
because you were the one who said 86th Street was wonderful.
Yeah, it was turned
It
on.
ain't.
It was even in the news.
It ain't. I
It
am
ain't,
just
okay.
telling you that sporadic is the word I would use.
Yeah, Mr. X.
I have a Christmas present for the MTA and the PCAC. Okay, and to that transit chief, forgot his name. He needs to tell the cops who are assigned to these transit police districts to refrain from approaching me and saying you have to board the train or leave the station. Refrain from stopping me from speaking to station agents, which I've mentioned in the past. Okay, in the past, particularly in Transport District 3 and 11, they stopped me from speaking to the station agents, friendly conversation-wise, had the audacity to say.
Can you give me the station names too?
I could do that later, but I'm just saying that within Transit Districts 3 and 11, because I grew up with them in the 1970s alone, they had the audacity to say I couldn't speak to the station agents, chat with them, so we can get to know each other better. They had the audacity you have to leave the station or board the train to the station. It also stopped me from staying warm. Some of them challenged me to fights. I don't appreciate that. So he needs to tell those cops to get the hell away from me, or I'll make them look like Peter Calco, aka the Devil's Disciple. It's that simple. Because I'm surprised by now I just start picking up chairs and turning these stations to ECW to Bingo Hall. It's getting ridiculous. Okay, you want to go after me because I didn't pay my fare? That's another story. But for you to go after me because I chose to stay warm, especially when it's freezing cold outside, it's bureaucratic bullshit, and I'm not tolerating it. So while he's here, now he's the chief,
I'm gonna get the details.
he better tell those cops to get the hell away from me, or I'll make them look like Peter Calco, get the Devil's Disciples. That simple.
We got it.
And that includes picking up chairs and making their precincts look like ECW to Bingo Hall. It's that simple.
Yeah, you'll give me the details.
Yes. And here's Christmas present for the PCAC and the MTA.
All right. Let's go to new business now. Yes.
I'll take a minute. I just want to talk about elevators. The Atlantic Barclay Station has, I think, 4 or 5 elevators. At any given time, one of them is out. Today it was the Brighton line elevator that was broken. Is it old age or not being maintained, or what's going on? Why do they keep breaking down? They're fixed pretty quickly.
You know what my suspicion is? People with hand trucks and very heavy things are being brought into some of these elevators that they were not meant for. I've seen it personally, but we'll find out. Did you get an elevator number on that one at all, or it's just the only one serving the Brighton?
There's only one.
Okay.
Andrew?
1 sec.
No, it's the answer to that question.
At Atlantic Barclays? Even though it's totally in their property?
No, sure. He's not talking. He's not talking about the street one. He's talking about the platform one, and that one was turned off for a reason, because it was, when you go in the elevator, it jerks up and down. There's a piece they're replacing it. That was announced on
Is
the.
there signage to that effect?
Yes. It was lit up out of service.
Chris,
There was a guy there.
You can put that thing down now.
I forgot because I'm holding. No, but I mentioned it. I sent an email in already to PCAC,
Okay.
and it's already on my MTA app. It did warn us that elevator was out, and I'm glad they're fixing it because it was going like you get on the elevator, it's ready to move before it closes the door.
Okay, but the bigger picture is that on any given day,
Yeah.
one of the elevators serving the platforms
Yeah.
to the mezzanine, not outside, but within the confines of the station, are out. So I'm concerned that these are just, well, if they're using them as freight elevators, that would trigger a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they're just getting old and some got to get on some list to be replaced.
Yep. And frequency of being out is one of the criteria, I would think, for being replaced. Yes.
Has anybody looked at using video cameras to try to address the fare evasion issues at subway stations?
I asked about whether cameras could record fare evaders, and it requires face recognition software and a place to transfer the images and everything,
I didn't.
and somebody to watch it, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean for individual prosecution, but just so that the port or the police department can see where the problems are, and then maybe address them, with additional enforcement.
I think that was raised, actually,
think it
because
was.
Andrew, you raised the question
I did raise it.
very similar. And the answer was very similar, that they, have to have somebody to watch it, but it was really that they are looking at cameras that, and people also have privacy issues even though it's a public space. That's another conversation. But that they were looking to see if there were cameras that if there was a way that they could use the cameras to show some of the worst stations.
Yeah, we did raise that. Other items of new business? Stuart?
New business. We didn't have an opportunity to ask the chief about, and this is just a sense I get from reading the paper. I wanted to know if the Bureau has changed their process for how they watch trains that are secured. There seems to be an uptick in graffiti reports. And the appearance that the authority can't protect its assets, is indicative of the management failure. Or has there been some change in where they're parking the trains, or is there a change in the process of policing or observing the trains? Or is it just not an issue that they're focusing on now?
Are you noticing additional graffiti on the same line?
I have, yes.
So it's line specific that you see this problem?
And reading it in the paper as well.
And what line is it?
The F line, which traditionally doesn't have that much, or the N line, actually.
Today's paper, I think, on the news.
And it's not just necessarily car graffiti, it's also the assets, the whole new project on the N line where they're doing waterproofing and adding wall treatments to all of the stations to mask the concrete spalding. All of these panels now on maybe 5 out of the 8 stations are heavily graffitied. Kings Highway, Avenue U, 86th Street, and
on the end?
And at 8th, yeah, absolutely. So, but they've not been cleaned, and again, it's showing that they're there and ripe for the taking. And it's, and some of these stations aren't even finished.
No, they're not.
So, it's really failure to protect the assets and this investment.
Today's Daily News reports that the police picked up the #1 graffiti artist who has a long record, and among his deeds was spray painting the F trains at Jamaica Avenue Station and then the N Aqueduct, North Conduit Avenue. So I guess somebody's aware of what's going on. So you're
Well,
right. You're a regular Sherlock Holmes.
His Confederates are in Brooklyn.
But as
so-
usual, the report is wrong because there is no Jamaica Avenue station on the F line.
But still, it's something I think we should follow up with the chief. I don't know if that's an issue that
The
came
F
up-
and the N both are in the Coney Island yard, obviously. It's the other ends where they have different termini, so. But, Chris?
I was on the N on a Sunday after trying to, and he's right. I did see some graffiti, but also let's also add 18th Avenue.
You know, you won't believe this, Chris, but I took his word for it. You didn't have to tell me he
No,
was
no,
right.
but it's.
I'm a trained observer, but it's
His word is good, Chris.
I mean, it's not someone. It's not someone just scratching their initials. So I mean, these are mural size.
Well, if it's happening along the Sea Beach line where they're doing massive work on the stations, something is very wrong.
That's why I'm
we're
raising.
We're going to find out why that is. So.
You should maybe see if the group station manager at those stations, there should be an email to get in touch with them.
And they should, if they see this as a problem, they should stake out the place at odd hours. Bert.
Andrew, getting back to the police chief, don't we have so much surveillance cameras available that they can find places where people are hurting without having to wait for it even to be reporting?
I'm thinking of where the cameras are. They're at fare control areas.
They're at the booth, though, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean,
they could use that for instantaneous response to problems.
You know what I think would be great for us is if we could get if we could get a chance to look at the cameras that are facing fare control areas, so we can see what level of detail is available. And I'll see if I can arrange such a field trip.
Didn't we do that out of the police headquarters?
We did that, but that was not for what I'm asking this time.
I know, and I don't know how much they've increased it. I'm sure there's been a tremendous amount of increase in surveillance.
I would think so. I mean, Times Square is one of the largest stations for fare evasion, and there are so many fare control areas and cameras there that. Yeah, who's watching them?
And are they following up?
Any other items of new business? I'll raise one. I've raised this with Andy and Sally, and even they sort of scratch their heads. But if you've ever taken the 7 line, and I'm sure most everyone here has, especially Lisa, if you're coming in from Queens and you get to Grand Central, one of the announcements is change for the shuttle to Times Square. Do you know anybody that would do that while you're on the 7 train? And when you get to Times Square, having ridden from Queens, it says shuttle to Grand Central is available. Why do we have those kind of announcements? Aren't they really confusing for visitors?
Nobody listens to them.
That's not an answer, though. Yes, the transfer is technically available, but why would you do it? No. Going west.
I'll listen. I will listen.
At Times Square. Yes. Well, I did it at Times Square. It says. Where do you hear an announcement that doesn't say Hudson Yards?
No, it does, but it doesn't say Times. It would be better, people at Grand Central taking it to get to the west side and thinking that they're going to Times Square, and then they're not familiar and hear an announcement that says this train goes to the Hudson Yards.
Yeah, but it does say next stop, if you're, Fifth Avenue. Yeah.
But why are you encouraging people to transfer to this? I'll listen.
You'll see what I'm saying. It's ridiculous. Any other items of business? Yes.
I did forget to mention the Q train on weekends says transfer the 82 SBS, and we know it does not run on weekends.
Is that on every train it says that?
Yes. The B82, Kings Highway in Brooklyn. And actually says it on Kings Highway.
Chris, have you ridden that very train into Manhattan? No, the queue. Okay.
Both directions.
Are you aware of whether it is set on the weekday or the weekend cycle? Because many conductors do not set them correctly. For instance, the reason I
Weekend.
asked you that is when you get to Times Square or another station, see if it mentions the W.
No, it's has. When I did ask that, do you answer that question? One Q train had it on a weekend, and it does not say the W or the M.
Okay, but it does say the.
82 SBS is the only
Then that's a
thing.
mistake.
Yeah,
We have to report that then.
because
Just to make sure that it's the weekend setting we're
no,
talking
no.
about.
I know what you're talking about. It's every Quincy I've been on, and I'm saying, and the Q train has it on the weekend.
Okay. Yes.
And they announced that on the F and N lines also.
That there's a B82 on weekends?
Yes.
Oh, that's really bad. Okay. You got this? We will report that immediately. No, but it's probably here somewhere.
Did it go
Deborah
out?
probably took it.
Okay, everybody signed up?
I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday and New Year,
And if anybody wants a copy of the sustainability report, we have.
and we'll
printed
see
one
you
out
all
next year.
next year.
I think we either have one or two, but they're also available on our website. Not on the MTA site, but on VCAC.org.
Have we asked why it's not on the table?
Not yet.